Really good. I got my neck fixed, so that's why I've been out for a little while. I had like C5 through C7 discs replaced. So
What was that like?
it was pretty nerve-wracking. I'd postponed for a long time just because that's an invasive surgery. It's a spinal surgery. I had one fight left in my contract, and I was like, do I fight it out or do I get this fixed? And after the Matt Brown fight, I was like, dude, I need to get this fixed. So I scheduled it. I went in, I got it fixed, and I just didn't okay, all bets off. Like, okay, well, we'll see what happens. And it's like post-op, like 10 minutes, I felt incredible. And I'm talking like 10 minutes after I woke up post-surgery, I was like, oh my gosh, my neck is fixed. Went through therapy, did all the stuff, waited the allotted amount of time to where I could start to, make contact and increase my training. And then I did kind of like a 6-week fight camp, like trial, cut weight, sparring, wrestling, grappling, live stuff, like hard lifting, hard training, and I felt fantastic. So I called the matchmaker and was like, hey, I think I can fight in April. That's enough time for this thing to heal properly. I feel really good. And then I ended up renegotiating for 4 more fights, and this is the first fight in my 4-fight contract. He gave me an opponent, an Alex Morono, and I was like, absolutely, that's a great fight. I've seen him fight a couple of times. We may have even fought on the same card. He's game. He's pretty good everywhere. I think it's a really exciting fight. And so scheduled it, and boom, here we are, April 6th, this Saturday.
Do you feel like a whole new fighter? Like, has it kind of opened your confidence level and all of that? Do you feel like going into this is like almost a whole new fresh start for you?
100%. I didn't realize how bad my neck was, and I've had a lot of injuries. I mean, I don't know how long it's been, since 2010, so like 14 years or something like that, that I've been fighting with the UFC. And these last couple of years, like I've dealt with it, but like through steroid injections, like maintenance and stuff like that. But when you're talking about a spinal surgery, it's pretty serious, and so it's, you have to kind of look at the longevity, you have to look at the damage. And I've had other surgeries too that I had complications with that had put me out. And the problem with fighting at a really high level is you have to constantly be evolving, otherwise you get left in the dirt. And so it's like, if you're off for too long, I mean, it's hard to get back to the curve, and so, or get back with the times. And so with this one, I kind of, it's early on, maybe 4 or 5 years into my career, I had a wrist surgery that went bad twice. I had to do revisions. I was out for almost 2 years, and I almost hung it up then just because, it was so challenging to come back and compete. But with this one, man, I feel like, I was out for the 3 or 4 months. I went back, like everything went as scheduled, but like I could shoot on this side. Like I didn't have to make any major adjustments. As a matter of fact, like when my kids talk to me in my truck and I turn my head, I have to like old man this. I was like, oh my gosh. So sometimes I'm still like turning my head and I'm like, well, I don't need to do that anymore. So it's like I didn't know how bad it was until I got it fixed. And so, like a new lease on life, even outside of fighting. But in the gym, man, I feel great, with live rounds, so it's like definitely a little bit more confidence. And then also, too, like it kind of eases some of the burden of like, I don't want to get done and be like, oh, I should have stopped earlier because of this injury. And so, I don't know, confidence is good, like quality of life is really good. And then, so I'm in a good spot mentally and physically. And man, the desire to prepare, like, has not left. Like, man, I put like 57 practices in for this, you know what I mean? And it's like the desire was there, the determination. There's some times where practices like didn't work out, but I still made it happen, and I still, so it's like that is still there. And outside of that, when it's time to go, like, I'll be fucking ready. So it's good.
And we just talked at length about all the positives, but is there even a little bit of you that's worried that, oh my gosh, I may have spent all this time fixing this and I could go in there and injure it in 4 seconds?
A little bit, but it's like I worked with a neurospinal guy who's the best in his field, and he left me with great confidence. I mean, one of the things that I asked before I even went in there was like, hey, what's the likelihood of me re-herniating this? What's the likelihood of me injuring it if I return to sport? Will it take care of the pain in my arm, the pain in my chest, the pain in my bicep? Will those things, and he left me with confidence, like, listen, if you keep competing like you are right now, you're definitely going to re-herniate it. Like, the likelihood of re-herniating is significantly higher. But after, he's like, yeah, you're not going to re-herniate it. Obviously, injuries can happen and things like that, but I have a lot of confidence going in that it'll be strong, it'll be durable, and so I feel really good about it. And then with the practices that I put in, it's like I've been pushed everywhere, and I feel really confident that it will stay, and so I don't have any apprehensions going into the fight with the injury or re-herniating it or injuring my neck, and I feel pretty confident. Also, too, I know Aljamain Sterling had it, Chris Weidman had it. We had different doctors, but the confidence that they had going out competing before and after, like, I feel pretty confident, so I don't have any apprehension.
Did you speak to either of them about the experience or get
Just
advice?
Chris. I asked Chris. I sent him a message and was like, hey, what do you think? He's like, oh, it's the best thing ever. So it was like 100% yes, do it. For me, it was just, possibly hanging it up, was kind of hanging over. And then also, too, towards the end, like the last week or two before I made the decision, like it was, being in long-term recovery, I don't take prescription pain pills. And I was like getting to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is horrible. The little Aura rings that the UFC gave us a while ago? So I had an Aura ring. So for a year, my average sleep time a night was like 3 hours and 12 minutes. So not only was I not sleeping, but like I was having a difficult time with a lot of things. It was kind of like if I warmed up for training, that's when I felt good because my neck was warmed up. But outside of that, like, having to take a bunch of like Tylenol and ibuprofen and naproxen, sodium naproxen, and like, man, it's just like, and now that stuff I don't have to take, like, so I feel really good about it.
What about your opponent? I know you already mentioned a little bit about him, but what sort of fight are you expecting on Saturday night?
Fireworks. He comes blazing. It kicks and punches. He moves forward. He adapts well. He's got some submission finishes. I seen him. I don't watch a lot of like footage on the person that I'm fighting, but I've seen him fight. Like I remember watching him fight Donald Cerrone, and I remember him taking him down. I've seen him catch a few people in submissions, and so it's like I kind of know what my game plan is. I don't really look or expect certain things from him. Of course, there's things that he does in the fights that I've seen, but that's part of the fun and elusive part, is that I get to go prepare to compete against him, and so he's going to have to adapt to my game plan. That's my mindset. So outside of that, it should be a really exciting fight because he's an exciting fighter. So, and I am too. So I'll be pressing forward and finding a way to win.
And now that you're a whole new fighter, how do you kind of see the rest of the year playing out? Do you want to keep fighting a lot? Do you have like specific goals in mind for the year?
Well, I'm definitely not a spring chicken, but on the elevator on the way over here, somebody was like, what are you, in your late 20s? I'm like, what? I said, no, I'm 39. And she's like, no way. And then she was with her daughter, and I asked where they were from, and she was like, like basically Salt Lake City. And I was like, oh, well, I live in Provo. I said I was born in Ogden. She was like, I was going to tell you I was from Ogden, but nobody knows where Ogden is. And so we ended up like communicating and talking. But I forgot what I was going to say. God
Just
damn
want
it.
to give her a shout out for calling
Yeah.
you in your 20s.
Yeah.
Your goals for the 2024.
Oh, my goals. Yeah. So, and I also, she was like, well, is this something I can come to? And I said, well, they're anticipating coming to Salt Lake City in like summer, like late summer, early fall, tentatively. And so my plans would be to come back and compete in Salt Lake City. I fought there 6 or 7 years ago, and it was incredible. Like, I'd had a bunch of fights in Utah outside of the UFC, and then but fighting there, like, I mean, there was like thousands of fans there. Like, it was insane. It was so loud. Like, my walkout music, I couldn't even hear my walkout music because it was so loud. And then after they called the decision, it was so, like, it was an incredible experience. So I would be looking forward to coming back and fighting in Salt Lake City if they came back. And then outside of that, you know, of course, I just take it one fight at a time, pending injuries or whatever. So.
Thank you.
Did you say that when you were recovering from the spinal surgery, you were only taking like ibuprofen or aspirin?
Yeah, just Tylenol. So I didn't take one pain pill.
That's crazy. As a fellow guy that had a spinal surgery, you're an absolute monster. I mean, I don't know how you could get through. So I understand when you say you didn't sleep much, because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, dude, it was horrible, absolutely horrible. But I won't just. And I know it's not everybody, but for me, I will not leave post-op with prescription pain medication just because of my past and being in long-term recovery. So this time I didn't have to. I didn't have to at all. I did take some Tylenol. I did take some ibuprofen, but, you know, it was for those first couple of weeks. And the incision was in the front, so the toughest part was like talking, because my trachea was all scratchy and felt like I got punched in the throat for like 2 weeks. But outside of that, man, I felt great.
You know, it's interesting. You know, you talk back about the wrist surgeries. Now, at the time, you almost called it quits. And then you talk about a neck surgery. Most of us would think, like, that's worse. But then you want to still continue. Was it just the words of the doctor? Was it talking to people like Chris Weidman that made you feel better about that surgery as opposed to maybe the apprehension you had of the wrist surgeries earlier on in your career?
I think cumulative. I think it was the confidence from the surgeon. I think it was confidence from other, like, fellow fighters. And then on top of it, how I felt. Like, ultimately, it was how I felt. And so after going through the therapy and doing all the strength training and mobility stuff, and then coming back, like, I have an incredible team, Agima Jiu-Jitsu and MMA in Provo, Utah. Like, I have students, I have athletes, I have just regular people. And, you know, my coaches, like Marco Sanchez, he's a fellow teammate and training partner. I have great teammates and teamwork. And it's like the confidence from training and how I felt was kind of my ultimate determining factor. And then outside of that, the confidence from the doctor and from, like, Chris. You know, it's like he said he felt great. He's like, man, I got back to it. I've been wrestling. You know, and so I'm just like, okay, you know what? I think it helped with all of them.
Yeah. And you said you put in roughly, and I'm sure you could have just been spitballing a number. You said you put in 57 practices.
Yeah.
I don't know how long the fight week camp, because I know a lot of times fighters say 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. That's every day, you know. So how long was this, and how often were you able to? And is that different amount than what you would do in past?
So I try to really pick it up 6 weeks out. But one thing that I do that I think has helped me maintain is that I do between 6 and 9 practices a week, even when I'm not training for a fight. And so I try to stay consistent all throughout the years, because the 2 years that I had off, there was about 10 months where I couldn't practice, and I was like mad. I was upset with myself. I was upset with, like, training, and it was a wrist surgery. It was hand, and you know, it's like there was a certain point where I kind of gave up a little bit on myself, where I was like, dude, if I can't punch and I can't grab with this hand, I shouldn't be doing anything. But I learned from that, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not using this hand. You know, maybe get better at left hooks, maybe work this, maybe work this. And so I use those past experiences to adapt. For me, it's kind of like, if shit's broke, I get it fixed. and I heal up, but I maintain a certain level of training all throughout the year, no matter what. Because for the last like 15 years, this has been my primary source of income. Outside of the speaking, running a gym, doing like little endorsement things, the McGee project stuff, like speaking. And so it's kind of like I had to put this first. So I just made sure that no matter what, I put in 6 to 9 practices a week. And so for me, I found out, I think it was like 10 or 11 weeks or 12 weeks before, but I don't think we got the deal done until like 8 or 9 weeks before. But I just was like, okay, well, he's looking for a fight. I'm going to start preparing right now and give myself a little bit more time, because I was out for those, 2.5 or 3 months where I wasn't active. I was just doing light stuff. So the confidence is good coming into it. And then I knew a little bit before, and so I just started practicing. And then once I found out who it was kind of like, okay, well, we'll adapt our training. I gave the name to my coaches. They kind of game plan training, and then I go from there.
And then they give you another 4-fight deal. That's gotta feel good that the UFC still obviously has confidence that they're entertained by what you put out there. Did that give you maybe extra breathing room going into this fight, and just overall knowing that you have more fights on the books?
Yeah, it definitely did. It's like a breath of fresh air, and then it's like, oh, you need to commit yourself for the next 2 years. So it's like kind of a double-edged sword. Like, ever since I made it into the UFC, I've taken it one fight at a time, because there is no guarantees. Injury can opt you out. Sometimes the pressure can take you out, and then sometimes the UFC can take you out, or opponents can take you out. So there's lots coming against you. So it's kind of like my whole career, I've tried to stay in the moment, stay in today, and then focus on, obviously your next fight is your most important fight. It does give you a little bit of breathing room knowing that you renegotiated and you do have, a set number of fights. But also, too, it's like you're never guaranteed those fights. Like, I'm not guaranteed until I step on the scale and weigh in. And then I'm not guaranteed until I step in that cage and they say fight and we go. So it's kind of like, you see people miss weight. You see people get injured. People like falling down in the tubs and shit. And like, so it's like, there's no guarantee. So I try to control what I can control, think about what I can control, focus on what I need to do, and then that way I'm prepared and ready to step in there when it's time to go.
And then last for me, 40 is just around the corner as well. Like you said, this could be the next 2 years. Do you envision, if things get good, you stay through these last fights? Will you try to get another one, or do you think possibly that these fights could be the end of the fighting days?
It's kind of 50-50. So I don't want to look too far ahead, but if I'm feeling good and I'm competing good, then bring it on. If not, I do want to look at the long-term repercussions, because being 40, next chapter, which I've been building, probably 3 years into the UFC, I started speaking professionally. And so outside of that, it's kind of like, okay, what's my next route? I own and operate a gym with 2 of my close friends, Dane and Amy Aristizabal. And so outside of that, like, I don't want to put too much stock in looking too far ahead. But hey, if I feel good, I'm going to keep going.
And I know I said that was going to be the last one, but you did bring up the speaking thing. I'm sorry, I don't know this. How is the Court McGee project still going well?
Yes, last year we spoke. We spoke all over the country. We went to New Jersey. We went to New Mexico. So I speak to youth, young adults, juvenile justice, like youth detention, youth corrections, high schools, middle schools, open to the public, but it's all recovery related. And then the McGee Project has a few things that implements the ability to help youth and young adults that come forward that need help with recovery. And yeah, it's a 501c3 nonprofit, the McGee Project. So you can go on and check us out. You can book us to speak. I kind of limit it to about 15 to 20 a year tops, so that I can still maintain my training schedule, operate my gym, But my why is carrying the message to people who struggle. And so that gives me the motivation to show up and give Alex Morono my fucking best. You know, that gives me the motivation to show up to my son's wrestling practices, to coach the high school wrestling that I coach at Mountain View High School. That gives me the drive and motivation to work with athletes that come into my gym that want to compete, because I can share my story with them. So it's my motivating factor in everything that I do. And the most important thing in my life is my recovery. I wouldn't have my wife. I wouldn't have my kids. I wouldn't have a 14-year career in the UFC. I wouldn't have the friendships or relationships that I had I not got sober April 16th, 2006. So if I stay sober for another couple of weeks, you know, God willing, on April 16th, I'll have 18 years of continuous sobriety.
That's incredible. Congratulations. I look forward
Thanks,
to that.
man.